So many people think fashion is superficial, but after researching Christian Dior, I am convinced fashion can be also about loyalty, survival, beauty, bringing beauty back into a broken world. And the more and more I research the family, what amazing people they were. And I'm seeing how amazing people are creating amazing things. Because this story, trust me, it goes way beyond dresses. So let's dive in. When most people think about Christian Dior, they think flowers, elegance, the new look. Maybe some in the know think about like superstition and how he always carried some trinkets around in his pocket. But before Dior became Dior, his life had already fallen apart. This is a glasses off conversation. So his father had a very successful manure business. And Christian Dior was born in 1905 in Granville, which is in the northern part of France, and tons of farming and all those other things. So yeah, you would think a manure business would do quite well. Everybody thought that. Then Christian Dior kind of comes of age, wants to start an art gallery, right? That's his passion, that's what he wants to do. His father agrees to back him financially, which is a huge deal. Well, guess what happens next? 1929 happens. So his family's finances collapsed, and with that manure business went his dream of this art gallery, which had opened and then had to shut its doors. And then his mother died, and his was very close to his mother, and he looked up to her greatly. She was a world-renowned, to this day, botanist. She managed to grow tropical flowers outdoors in France because of the way she layered. I did a video on it a while back, but just brilliant woman. World War II hits, and that hits the whole world like a ton of bricks, right? And he's not immune to it. So Dior entered the French military in 1940, and keep in mind, he's already 35 years old, okay? He entered the military at the outbreak of the war, and then after France's collapse, after it became occupied by the Germans, he spent about a year, a little over that, doing agricultural work as part of his military service in the central part of France before he went back to Paris and joined Lucien Lelong in 1942, a famous designer. But in the meantime, he was trying to do just like these little sketches and things that whatever could pay the bills and keep the table full. And if you think that's a story of resilience, number one, you're not wrong. But number two, strap in and shut up, because here comes Catherine Dior, his little sister. Most people know her as Catherine Dior, but her real name was Ginette. Catherine was actually her code name. She served in the French resistance as part of the F2 network. Long story short, Catherine was incredible, and she would hide people both in her own place and in Dior's place from time to time. And she would pass that intelligence, and she would risk her own life. She fell in love with this man, another resistance member named Hervé de Chaponnerie. And he, now not pro-adultery, obviously, but he was married, but they were so in love. And together they were just fighting this resistance thing until 1944. Catherine gets captured. And her brother is distraught. Hervé is distraught, of course. They don't know where she went. Now, something I should mention is that during this time, again, France is under occupation by the Nazis. And while working with Lelong, Dior was still making dresses and that sort of thing. And he had no choice but to outfit some of the Nazis' wives in these beautiful dresses. Originally, apparently, the Nazis wanted to bring all dressmaking over to Germany. And even their own people were like, please don't. Let the French do it. So he was more or less pressed into service to do that, and it was very clear that there was no choice. But my point is, I don't fault him for doing that. And the stakes weren't just embarrassment, it was like life or death and torture, and that's exactly what happened to Catherine. Is she got arrested, detained, sent off to a concentration camp, specifically Ravensbrück, and while there she was tortured. One story that really stood out to me about her, though, was that when the Nazis would throw food, her daily ration of food, which was pitiful anyway, on the ground and be like, eat up, she would be like, I'm not hungry today. She would not eat anything off the ground. She wanted to maintain her dignity. So the amount of mental resilience that went into that, I can't even fathom. Anyway, remember how I told you that he was making dresses for some of these Nazis' wives and stuff like that? So Christian Dior, he had a few contacts, and so he's trying to find out, where is my sister? And it all came to nothing. He was not able to find her, know where she was, rescue her, none of that. But one day, it was liberated. Her camp was liberated, France was liberated, and he found out that she was going to be home on a train in the following month. And he showed up to the train station on the day she was supposed to arrive, and he walked right by her because he could not even recognize his own sister. And that speaks to the level of dehumanization. She was so emaciated that he walked right by her and didn't recognize her after a year. It's just tragic to me. That image mentally sticks with me. Because if you've ever seen the darker side of humanity, if you've dealt with extreme, intense struggle, or, well, anything really that they had been through, certainly, I think there's something deeply noble about trying to bring beauty, in the latter half of your life, trying to bring beauty back into a world that was so dark. And that's what they both endeavored to do. Christian Dior with his new look, which, by the way, was originally called Carole. It was Harper's Bazaar that named it the new look. That was his first major collection. Quick break to say, please like and subscribe if this is something that you're enjoying. I put tons of research into these videos, and I really enjoy making them, but I'm not monetized or anything like that, and I need to be if I'm going to keep doing this. So I'm just saying. With Catherine, she and Hervé ended up getting married, and they moved to a flower farm, and their flowers fed into Christian Dior's perfumes. I also want to mention, for those who don't know, although it's kind of becoming common knowledge, Miss Dior perfume, my favorite one, I like the Blooming Bouquet version. I'll put the fragrance notes up. He built that perfume, he invented that perfume for her, as like he was so overjoyed that she was back and she was safe and she was back in his life. And she also kept the Dior Museum going until 50 plus years after his death and right up until her death. Her flowers provided beauty to the second half of Dior's life, that fragrance that he loved so much. And maybe that's why I connected with the story, is because I believe that Dior's military background taught him such resilience, and certainly her background. You don't control your schedule. You don't control where you're sent. You don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You learn flexibility. You learn to trust people. You learn to trust people of all ages. And by the way, fun fact, YSL was so nervous to meet his icon when he was 18 years old that he just didn't speak. He was just like, oh, you know? And Dior hired him and put him in a fairly prominent role. And I think that if you weren't somebody who spent time in the military, that would sound crazy. But I've been in for 15 years. I served, and I remember seeing 17-year-olds fix airplanes, and 18-year-olds brief generals, and 19-year-olds learn to fly aircraft, before they even finished undergrad. So if you were to ask a random entrepreneur on the street, would you trust this 18-year-old to work in your business in any kind of capacity? They'd probably say, no, send him back when he's got more experience. But Dior said, he's got the love for fashion. Yeah, bring him over. And that was, I think, due potentially to his military experience. And you learn to trust people who don't look like you or think like you, and because you realize that all of you working together with all of your skills, your backgrounds, and your different thoughts and ideas, and even your different looks, it all makes you better as a team. It gets the mission done. And whether that mission is fashion or a military one in nature, it's an important lesson. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea, basically, that amazing people create amazing things. And by the way, Dior hired YSL, who was, I wouldn't say openly, but was noticeably gay at the time when it was not safe to be so. Dior is said to have been closeted, and I think there was an element of taking a chance on this kid in YSL, who was different, just like Dior understood he was different. And that was beautiful. And then we'll get to YSL in another video, but he's the first person to walk a black model down the runway, because he took a chance on her. And the system keeps replicating, and amazing people are doing amazing things because they've broken out of these biases and constraints. So my thesis statement is that maybe Dior didn't just give us clothing. Maybe he gave us proof, solid proof, that beauty can endure hardship and rise back out of the ashes. So what surprised you most as we come to a close? Was it the Catherine Dior origin story? Was it the fact that we're not calling her by her real name, which is Ginette? Is it her resistance connection? The story behind the Miss Dior perfume? The fact that Dior carried trinkets in his pocket for good luck? What stood out the most to you? Please comment. Please let me know you've learned something from this video. I did. So till next time, here's me reminding you that fashion is never just fashion. Keep saying it over and over. Anyway, see you next time. Ciao!